Hi.
Welcome back to the Things You Ought to Know podcast. I am Kelby
And I'm Erica Arnautovich.
and together we make up the
Things You Ought to Know podcast.
Today we are excited to dive in and get to know, for you to get to know us as your podcast host and as your virtual friend. Hopefully one day when we can do some meetups, we'll be your in-person friends too. We really haven't sat down and talked about our journeys with each other. We've gotten bits and pieces of each other's through just trying to relate on things, but not the whole thing. So I'm excited to kind of hear your journey and vice versa. And I don't think I've ever sat down and actually told the whole thing from start to finish. So
yeah, I don't know that I have really either. I've done bits and pieces when I've done trainings out in childcare centers and things, but I've never really told obviously the whole thing. That's not the point of the training.
Yeah.
So yeah, but we're excited today for lots of things, but I wanted to just, say that Things You Ought to Know, this podcast is a judgment-free platform for all members of the autism community to come together and tell us things that we ought to know and educate us while we're providing education that we've learned on our journeys, and just kind of everybody sharing everything we ought to know together.
Yeah, so some things you can kind of expect to hear on the podcast are really raw emotions. Eric and I, going into this, our goal is to just provide relatability for other autism moms, autism parents, any person part of the autism community, be able to provide just that ear and something for someone to say oh, someone else is going through that on their journey. I wonder what they did.
Yeah.
So we want to be able to have a wide variety of people in the autism community, anywhere from healthcare workers. We're both in the healthcare field, so that's a passion of ours, to be able to provide some insight into that healthcare world, and as hard as it is to navigate for people. We would love to have some. You're gonna hear. I'll just go ahead and let you know. There's
our third business partner.
Our third business partner is in the background. It's my 7-month-old son. That's just mom life. You just sometimes have to multitask. So you'll see me rocking him sometimes, and he's ready for nap time. So hopefully he falls asleep here soon.
Yep. But he has lots of things to say sometimes.
He does.
He's going to chime in with things you ought to know, and he's got a lot of good info. So
hopefully one day in a few years when he's talking, we can have him on from the brother's perspective.
I would love that. I would love that. Yeah, he and Zara can go back and
that
forth.
Would be awesome. Okay, who else can we expect to hear from on this? So, who are some people we would like to have on?
ABA people, so all therapists, whether they be occupational, speech therapists, physical therapists, ABA therapists, which is the gold standard, therapy for children with autism. We'll dive into that a little bit more, as we go. But police officers, first responders, we want to have people out in the community who really are kind of, dealing with people with autism, because it's so prevalent. I think the most recent statistic of autism was 1 in 36. Children are being diagnosed with autism. So we need to get, this out to everyone, teachers with those IEP meetings. I go into schools sometimes to help with IEP meetings, and oftentimes parents and teachers, they just don't understand it. My mom is a teacher, and until my son, she really didn't understand autism.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. What grade did she teach?
She taught 7th grade English from for a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Recently just retired, actually. So yeah.
Congratulations on retirement.
I know. Good job, Gigi.
Oh, Gigi, I like that. Yeah. We're Momo and Nana, and then my mom made up, her name is Kelly. Well, hopefully we can have her on too from the grandma's perspective, both of them. But she did not want to be called a traditional name, so she came up with K-Mall. If that's not as Southern as it gets.
That is as Southern
K-Mall.
as it gets. I love it. Oh my gosh.
I was of course she would make up something.
I love it. Yeah, my mom made it, was going between Gigi and Mimi and all these different ones, and she settled on Gigi. So she was told. Zara was told what she was going to be called. Yeah, my dad was supposed to be Pops, but Zara couldn't say the full word, so it ended up being Pots.
Okay.
So he has stuck with Pots.
The boys only have just one grandpa, and he's Paul.
Yeah.
So that's Michael's father's not in the picture, and so Paul is on my side. It's my dad. So
Wow.
And that goes great grandpas or Paw, all of that. I think we run thick with the Southern names.
Yep. Mine was Paw too. So,
Was it?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So sorry to get on a tangent. You'll see that happens with us, but, some things that you ought to know about this podcast. You can expect to hear from us on a weekly basis. We are planning to put out a podcast every Friday. You might have heard that in our trailer. Please bear with us if we do not get it out in time. Life happens, but we will always do our best, and then we'll always try to communicate on social media if we're running late for any reason. So that way you are,
which we do,
aware. First time I met Erica, I said, one thing about the Phenotties, we gonna be late.
and I'm right there with her. When she's the few times you've been on time, I've been late. We'll get it right one of these days. So yeah,
we are excited to be able to put this together for y'all. We want to hear from you, so please sound off in the comments on YouTube, on our Instagram, on our Facebook page. Let us know some topics that you think we ought to know about and that we ought to hear about. Let us know of some guests that you would love to hear from. We've already got a few lined up that we're very excited about that have already confirmed that they're going to be able to come on with us. We can't wait to kind of pick their brains and hear from them. So we
really exciting.
Are really happy about all of that. So what you can expect from us today? What are we going to talk about today?
I think I want to know everything about your journey, because she said something at one point to me and I was like, oh my gosh, I did not realize this. We had very different, how our kids kind of came to recognizing they had autism in so many ways. So I really want to hear about your journey. I want to tell, about my journey. But I also want to hear your experience through the healthcare field. And my experience, I want to share that with the healthcare field, because I think we have some similarities and then we have some really stark differences in our journeys.
Yeah.
So yeah, and that way, hopefully everybody can find something that they'll be able to be like, oh, I understand that, I've been through that. So, between the two of us, I think we have a lot of really good points to share.
Yeah.
Our journeys.
I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
Well, I'll let you go ahead and start. I'd love to hear about, if you want to just tell us what you do for a career.
Yes.
I think that provides the listeners really good insight into kind of your thought process throughout the journey.
Yes.
And it really kind of guides how we do things when you understand healthcare.
It does.
So yeah.
So I am a pediatric nurse practitioner. I have worked at Tri-County Pediatrics, and we have a location in Rock Hill in York. We don't have one in Fort Mill. I live in Fort Mill.
Maybe that's a growth plan.
Yeah, growth plan. Yeah, you want to? But I've been there for 6 years, and I love kids. I've always loved kids, working with kids. But I, was just doing general pediatrics. And since my son, I have really dived into development. And so I went and got trained in the ADOS, which is the gold standard diagnostic tool to diagnose autism.
Not to put you on the spot, but what does ADOS stand for?
ADOS is
Sorry, I'm going to make you.
Oh my gosh.
We're allowed to Google in this.
I was going to say, no, it's the Autism Diagnostic Observation Schedule.
Okay.
And it's the second edition that we do. So we do the ADOS 2.
Gotcha.
Yes. Okay. So I was like, wait a second. Yeah, that would put me on the spot. Things like that. I'm like, I just know acronyms.
Same.
Yeah. But yeah, so we do that, and it's an hour-long process. I screen kids. We started back in January of 2023, and we have over 160 kids on our wait list now. So it's just such a need in this community. I try to do it a little different than a typical developmental pediatrician. Obviously, my diagnostic, days look nearly identical to what theirs would look like. But one thing that I'm trying to do differently, I do screenings appointments on either end, which are more like 30-minute appointments with patients. And I try to give parents some basic, I love the Early Start Denver model, which basically just helps with like children under 5. And it really helps them like just how to engage with them when your kid is not really engaging like a typically developing child. How can we get them to kind of engage, follow their lead? And it gives you like 5 steps. So I kind of broke that down, and I give parents what I consider really basic ABA techniques. I'm obviously not an ABA therapist. But
is that post-diagnosis? So you've already done the ADOS and then you do that?
Before, because my wait list is already at like 4 to 6 months.
Oh, I see. So those 160 that you've got waiting, you're pretty much doing some coaching with them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Getting them connected with BabyNet, or, those initial services like STOT, PT, or speech, occupational physical therapies, and getting them, some basic things that parents can do, because these parents are desperate, and you and I know that. Sleep issues, like all the things. So I'm trying to help them navigate give me 2 of your biggest concerns, and let's try to get you through until I can give you a diagnosis.
Breaking it off for them.
Yeah. Because as a mom, I just couldn't. That was my biggest goal starting the program, was once I had Luca settled, my thing in my head was I will never let a family go through this wait period knowing something's wrong. We know something, it's not wrong, but different. And this kid needs services. But these services are so difficult to get into, and the diagnosis is so difficult to get. So I just couldn't, my heart will not let me turn away a family who is in need of any information that I have that I can share.
Yeah, I love that. So to walk it back a little bit, you said you started the program in 2023. So they currently, that clinic had no diagnostic capabilities within there. So there was no one. So you brought forth the program.
I did. And I did that in collaboration with our Healthy Steps specialist, who just kind of came in. I believe actually they came in like the April before, the 2022.
And just to pause real quick, Healthy Steps, is that siloed to South Carolina? Or I want to make sure our audience knows what Healthy Steps is.
Healthy Steps is like under like the birth to 3, like First Steps is what it's called in South Carolina. But it is a national program.
Okay. So most people should understand what that is.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. It may be called something different, but it's kind of like they're trialing it in a lot of offices, and our office just got lucky enough to get chosen. But the First Steps director, who's also kind of has Healthy Steps under him, David Lisk, he is probably one of my favorite human beings on the planet. And he is just somebody who came, like I pitched this idea to him of what we needed. And he is just like so solution oriented. He was like, we're going to find a way to do this. When everybody tells us no, we're going to find a way, because the state puts up all these guidelines of who can diagnose. So we went out and found a developmental pediatrician who at the time was kind of in an independent office, but is now at Prisma Developmental Peds. And she's been a developmental pediatrician for a long time. Yeah. And she is absolutely amazing. And she was just like, I want to be a part of this. And, she was just so amazing, and took this on and co-signs my charts for me, so they'll get through DDSN. And couldn't be more like appreciative of like the team that has come together to put this together for all these families.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Acronym, healthcare loves acronyms. So again, really quick, DDSN stands for
Department of Disabilities and Special Needs. I knew that one.
Okay. You are passing the test today.
I know. Thank you. Don't ask me anymore. That too was like my quota. I'm going to try not to drop any more acronyms. I have to like think twice before I say anything about that. But yeah, so this is something that is so needed, because developmental peds in this area.
I think any area.
South Carolina is one of the hardest states in a lot of ways.
Do you know the average wait time?
I know that at Developmental Peds Prisma currently, which is where, if we have South Carolina Medicaid, that is the place they can go, except for a couple of plans can go over to Levine's.
Okay.
But overall, I'd say 75% of my population would have to go to Prisma, and they're on anywhere from I believe the last I heard was a 12 to 18 month wait list, if not more.
Yeah.
Depending on the age kind of thing too. I think that kind of plays a role.
We were you'll hear more about my story, but a little bit in Massachusetts where we were diagnosed, it was 18 to 2-year wait list.
Yeah.
So I've got some tips and tricks on how I got that to be cut that time down in almost a fraction of that. So I know you've got some tips and tricks too. So let's get into what did diagnosis look like for you? Actually, let's backtrack more than that and go into when did you notice something was a little different with Luca?
So I'm going to preview a little bit because our next episode, you're going to get to see our amazing husbands come on. So my husband is going to tell a little bit more of that part of the story, but I'm going to definitely say I breastfed Luca for the first year. And Luca, I always knock on wood, but to have autism and sensory, behaviors, Luca has always been a really good eater. So he viewed me as food. And so because I was viewed as food, I felt like Luca was very bonded with me. Now in hindsight, I think there were eye contact, gaze diversions and things like that as I was breastfeeding him. But honestly, I was probably so tired with a 3-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 16-year-old. At the time they weren't, they were 3, 12, and 13. So, I mean,
those preteen years are brutal.
They're brutal. And so, I think I was just so exhausted. I probably didn't pay attention in a lot of ways to some of those kind of cues. Also, something that threw me off and something that you learn in school and just kind of in your practice and in general peds is, babies' brains as they develop can really only hyper focus on one skill set. And yes, they should meet milestones. And really until 6 months when I filled out those developmental questionnaires, when I took him for his visits, he met them. It was 9 months where I was like, oh, something's up. But my husband had been saying since Luca was 4 to 6 months. So I got to give him props on that. And I kept saying, no, he was so gross motor. I mean, he was crawling by I think between 6.5, 7.5 months, somewhere in there. Luca was full blown, crawling
everywhere,
all over the place. I mean, he walked at 11 months. I mean, 10.5, 11 months. I mean, he was just so gross motor oriented. I just thought, he's a boy. We have these 3 other kids who, are doing a lot of the talking for him. He's a second sibling. There were all these other things that kind of made me think, I'm not ready to go down that road. But my husband kind of stayed adamant on me, and he kind of finally engaged my family. And I'll never forget when Luca was 9 months old, I took him down to the beach with my family. Just me and the kids went to be with my parents for a long weekend. And my mom was like, Erica, he's not making any consonant sounds. He wasn't doing, he was just doing the vowels, ah, oh, e, but he had no consonants.
And that was how old?
He was 9 months.
9 months, okay.
And so, my mom having, some developmental experience with being a teacher, she kind of was just I don't know, something's just seeming off. And he was just always very fussy unless he was with me. So a lot of people,
you were food.
I was food. And so, yeah, that was kind of when I went, I remember that feeling your heart drops, something is off here that we need to get evaluated. I had this feeling it was autism, but my mind would not go there.
So have you experienced autism any other time? Is there any other family member, friend? I reference sometimes growing up in the school system, that was my first exposure to it that I can note. But what was your first exposure to it?
Honestly, it was in healthcare.
Okay.
I don't recall anybody that stands out to me that was definitely on the autism spectrum when I was in school. It was honestly when I was in healthcare, and probably the first real one that sticks out to me is once I started working at Tri-County in general peds. And I remember since being in general peds and then being pregnant with Luca after having worked there for a few years, kind of being this is really scary. Because, when you're pregnant, it was kind of oh, this is you see 10 of them all of a sudden, and you're oh my gosh, that's really scary. How's this happening kind of thing. So I remember saying that even to one of my fellow providers, while I was pregnant with Luca. Like, that's just so scary. How there's no risk factor. Like, we don't know of any, we know of like basic risk factors, potential risk factors, but there's just nothing concrete. Where it's like, well, I didn't drink while I was pregnant. I didn't smoke while I was pregnant. Luca was planned. I don't smoke at all, but like, I didn't do anything where it's like, I should put my pregnancy at risk. I don't take any medicines when I'm pregnant. So that was not like, the whole Tylenol thing, like that was not a thing for me. So it was really, I don't know. I remember having this like weird feeling. But yeah, that was my first experience.
Okay. So then you, your mom brings it to your attention. You preface what Yanni's going to tell us. He was more or less, from my understanding of your story, he was less kind about it towards the end. He was like this, he had to be a little bit more in your face about it. Like, we've got to do something about this.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I think also by the time when my mom said something, I came back. And then it's like, so, my husband kind of is the one who taught me this actually. He's like, one person says something, well, everybody has an opinion. Two people say something, think about it. Three or more people, which it was my husband, my mom, and my dad at this point, then like you really need to look at it. And typically that's within yourself. But this was something that I was like, and you have a mama gut. I always talk about this with my patients, but you have a mama gut. And something in me at that point was also starting to be like, I see a lot of differences here.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that was, but yes, he did. And my husband is not PC at all.
Neither is mine.
Yep. So I wouldn't say he was ever like super gentle about it, but he was definitely more and more like, look. And then finally we sat down and I was just like, okay. Once I got my brain wrapped around it, though, it was on.
Yeah. I loved how, and you'll hear this in next week's episode, but I loved how Yanni explained the experience. Like, you hit the ground running with no stop sign, no yield, nothing. You just barreled through any barriers to make sure that he was getting the care that he needed. So that was a really cool perspective from him. It was like, when we activate mom mode, she's activated.
Yeah.
She's activated.
Mama Bear was out. Yeah, in full swing. So
what did diagnosing the day of, lead us up to the day of diagnosing with Luca?
So I started cold calling like crazy. We had, private insurance, thankfully. So we were able to go to either Novant, Levine's, or Prisma, which are the three kind of main hospital systems that have developmental peds in our area. But there was also like freestanding places. There was a research center attached with MUSC or Prisma. And
sometimes you can link up with psychologists, right?
Yes.
If they handle a certain age group?
Yes.
Okay.
So I actually put Luca in a research study so that because they would give a free ADOS assessment. And so, if he was in that study. So that's actually who did his ADOS.
Okay.
But that was when he was like 16, 17 months old, I believe. But that was when he was 19 months old. And he was diagnosed when he was like literally 18 months and 4 days or something like that. I mean, it was February 2nd of 2022. I'll never forget that day, is engraved in my memory.
So 9 months, you said around 9 months, you noticed mom had said something to you. Yanni had already been saying something to you. So from 9 months to 19 months when he was diagnosed, were you actively trying to get him scheduled with someone? Yes. So roughly 10 months, almost a year it took you.
Yes.
Okay.
For the full diagnosis. However, in that time frame, I was also new. Because of my general peds experience, I knew the next step after diagnosis was ABA therapy. And I knew those wait lists were long because I'm the one who puts the referrals in. And then I would hear from moms like at the next physical, the year next, like, oh no, we're still on the wait list, that kind of thing. And I'm like, okay, this is not going to fly with mama. So while I was calling, I was looking at genetics because somebody said, if he tested positive on like a genetic test, which he did not, but, like 20% chance. We got an appointment with genetics. We got an appointment everywhere. On my lunch break, I think my bosses actually asked me at one point, are you okay? I had just lost so much weight because I wasn't eating on my lunch breaks. I was going and like either cold knocking on ABA therapy offices doors saying, look, I know he's not diagnosed. I need him on your wait list. He's going to be, diagnosed at this point. We have an appointment. I'm telling you, he's a level 3. I need him diagnosed. I knew he was a level 3. Hearing he was a level 3 on the day of diagnosis sunk
Still
me.
different.
Oh, it sunk me. Like to a point where I didn't hear anything else after she said level 3.
Yeah.
He was starting ABA therapy the next week. Finally, I got a call. I'll never forget. I was in the bathtub. I had the flu, and I was in the bathtub, taking a hot bath, and my phone rang. Like everything in me, it took everything in me to get up out of that tub because I had just gotten in like a couple minutes before, and my phone rang, and I was like, something just told me I needed to get up and take that call. And it was Ashley Anderson, who's the BCBA and owner of Carolina ABA, which was Luca's first ABA place facility. And she called me and said, hey, I just want to let you know we can start Luca on this date, which was literally the week after his diagnosis. I had been to her door, I don't know, at least 5 times, I feel like, if not more, probably a lot more. I'm not going to make myself sound more crazy than I probably am.
You did what you had to do, though.
But I think she kind of said, yeah, I know that you've been to the door several times, and I'm like, yeah, sorry, I promise I will not be a crazy mom if you just let him start therapy, that kind of thing. But she was just an amazing BCBA for Luca, and I'll never be able to repay her for listening to me, and kind of taking that chance and putting him, like scheduling him hours before he was, officially diagnosed. I mean, he didn't start until he was officially diagnosed, but kind of taking my word, like, he is. He had a stat assessment. He was in a BabyNet receiving speech therapy, occupational therapy. We got him qualified, for physical therapy, just to have the more therapy, the better. So yeah, we had a great team from the get-go. We still have the same occupational therapist. We have new speech therapists, but we loved our first one. We love the one we have now too. But that change only occurred because of ABA hours and scheduling conflict. And we still have our same early interventionist, Cindy Beal, who she is going to come on too, and she's a character. We love her.
Yeah, can't wait to pick her brain.
No, she's amazing. We will, we'll dive in with her, but she has just been like a godsend to us.
That's awesome. So then, to kind of close out what that journey of diagnosing looked like for you, what was, I'd like to know kind of like your top 2 emotions that day. Can you kind of walk us through?
Yeah. I think my first emotion that I felt was fear. I think that's the very first emotion. It was the fear of the unknown. It was the fear of putting my 18-month-old in 40 hours a week of ABA therapy, turning him over to somebody who really I didn't know, and who couldn't tell me, Mommy, this or this happened. Like he had no way to communicate with me. I had to take their word for everything. So fear of that, fear of what is life going to look like, fear of school, fear of people and how they would react to Luca, fear of telling family members and making them understand. So there was so much fear. And my other emotion, I think, was just genuine sadness in that moment. It was sadness I felt like autism was taking away that precious time that a mom gets to have with their babies, where you hear all those cute little things that they're saying, and you hear those the mama and the just those sweet things that go so fast in a typically developing child. But I felt like it was stealing something from me. I felt like also I was super sad for Zara. She's now 7, but she was 3.5 at the time. And I was sad for her because my older 2 are my bonus babies, and they do not live full time with us. So that was all. I know that she would get sad when they would leave. She loves my older 2. and go back to their mom's house. And I felt like she was getting gypped of a true sibling experience again. And I was, I think sad/mad and fear. But those emotions still come and go.
I was just going to ask, where are you at now with those emotions?
Right. And like today is a good day.
Yeah.
Today's a good day. But, there's days where I still cry. Like I'll read something and it'll resonate so much with me. I'll still cry over it. I'm so proud of Luca and all of the things that he has overcome. I always kind of joke, like my way of dealing with things is sarcasm, or just kind of joking about it. But I always kind of joke that, Luca works more hours a week than I do. And I don't know how, and he has since he's 18 months old.
Yeah.
So I just am like, I'm so proud of him. And like, he wakes up with a smile on his face and goes to bed with a smile on his face. He's the happiest kid.
He really is.
I just love him. But I'm proud of him. But yeah, those emotions still come and go. And there's days where I see it in Zara, her like, Mommy, why doesn't my brother talk? And so those questions, they sting. Or even when you like hear like a friend, I have like some friends that have younger kids right now too, who are typically developing. And obviously I still deal with general peds and all these typically developing kids. And I'm always so happy and like love to hear about like the little stories and cute things they do. But I'm not going to lie, it stings.
Yeah.
There's times and days where it stings more than others. But I wanted to go really fast and just say, I also remember very vividly that year time frame or 10 months of time when I was trying to get diagnosis, and also even just after diagnosis, and still sometimes today, if I see an older kid with like, severe autism, and the parent is just, really struggling, or if, there's like a general peds kid who has a birthday very close to Luca's, who's like right around Luca's age and like kind of, but typically developing. There's still days I go into the bathroom at work and I have to cry for a minute. I just have to let it out. I could cry now. But yeah, but yeah,
I know that feeling.
Yeah. So,
and you don't want to like show it to people because it sometimes can be perceived as like, you're looking at the glass half empty, when it's like all we do is exude half full. Like we want to exude positivity.
Yeah.
But there are days that it just plain sucks. And it's a hard day or a hard moment, or you like you said, you see another kiddo typically developing near Luca's age, and you're just like, you kind of look at it as the why,
Yeah, why us?
Why us? Why Luca? Why Porter in my case,
Yeah.
And then to kind of bring it full circle though, I think usually within that day, for me at least, I figure out the why. I make it a point. So if I have a moment of like crying alone, usually in the shower for me, or something like that, then I usually I'm searching for the why, and it's like he teaches me something that day, usually, always.
Yes. I want to share this because this was like just the most recent experience we've had. It was a really hard day. And my son, as your son does too, Luca and Porter both are really regulated in water. And of course, with it starting to be nice outside, we have a pool, and we went out to swim. And again, Luca, gross motor wise, what we lack in other areas, Luca makes up for in his gross motor skills. Woo! Sometimes to a scary, but he had been for a while kind of like, I thought it was more like he's very visual. And I think he was gauging like how far he could go before like to get back to the step where he could stand in the pool. And all of a sudden that day he just took off and started swimming. He swam like half the length of the pool, or half the width of the pool. I'm sorry.
Go Luca.
And so I was like, he teaches me that like, stop focusing on what, I'm struggling with. Focus on what I can do. Cause like, I'm like, we got the next Michael Phelps here.
You really do.
Like, no interviews, please. Like, we'll need a publicist, but like, again, sarcasm is how I deal with things, but like, yeah, that I agree. I don't necessarily, I love that you actively search for it. I won't say that I actively search for it, but I feel like it does come full circle most
Yes,
days.
yeah. And if not that day, then it's usually the next day. It's like you find it. It finds you usually. You really don't. I say I search for it, but it finds me. I'm like, he teaches me organically something almost every day.
Yeah.
If it's not patience, if it's not kindness,
Yes.
if it's multiple things usually too that I see that he's teaching me.
Yeah. We really are. It's hard to see it every single day, but I do genuinely believe that we're blessed beyond belief. Because one thing that even with Zara, as she grew and developed, typically, you just miss those milestones because they just happen in a typically developing child.
See, I don't know that life because Porter was my first. And so now with my second, and I'll get into that with my journey, I don't know what you're talking about yet. The typically developing. Well, I mean, I do because Porter was up until about 12 to 18 months old. We saw some regression, but it's the after that. So it's like you're seeing, you already had that with Zara.
Right. Yeah. So that's definitely one of the stark differences in our cases. Luca kind of just plateaued between 6 and 9 months, somewhere in that time. I couldn't tell you exactly where, although I think it was probably around 7 months. He just didn't gain any more skills for a really long time. But whereas Porter regressed, and so those are two very different. And I've always said I don't know if I could have handled a regression. I mean,
oh yeah, it was tough.
That would, I think, for me, from my perspective, I obviously have patients who have had that same experience, and that hurts my heart, I think, almost more because it's like it almost feels like what happened.
Yeah,
what happened.
Yeah, you keep asking yourself that, and then finally you just give up, and you're like, it doesn't matter what happened. He's here. He is who he is.
Yeah,
and we move on from that. And I think probably the same thing for you, right? It's like, it doesn't matter why he didn't continue to develop neurotypically, but he is who he is.
He is who he is, and he always was going to be.
The next Michael Phelps.
He's going to be the next Michael Phelps. So Michael Phelps, you have a rival coming. He's only 3 now, but I don't know if there's an age limit, but he's pretty good. So, but yeah, I mean, they're amazing, and we're so blessed to be able to see, because every time our kids do something, whether it's clap their hands, we worked on clapping hands for 6 months before Luca did it. When he did it, I cried.
Same.
It's like, but we get to see all those precious development, and development to me is so fascinating now that I've really started to dive into it. I mean, I always knew the general, obviously, this is abnormal, this is normal. What do we, in this, we go here, and this, we keep going on this path. As a general peds practitioner, I think development is beyond fascinating, which is, I love doing my developmental days now, because seeing that difference now, or seeing those little milestones, those in between milestones that really just happen in typically developing kids that get overlooked, is by a lot of parents, is fascinating to see them meet each little one, because our kids have to be taught each little one. And so when they finally master it,
it's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
Or master a new food. That's a bigger deal.
It's a huge deal. Yeah. No, I am whoo. So I love it. I love when those parents come in, and to any other parent, or maybe even some, pediatric providers, they may kind of go, that's great. I'm hugging the mom, almost tearing up with her, because I know how she's feeling, because her kid clapped for the first time, or did an approximation to a wave. I'm like, Mama, this is a big day. Write this day down. You want to remember it, because it's so big.
It is.
It's so big.
It means the world. The smallest things mean the world to us, and that's something that I pride myself in as being an autism mom. Is I will celebrate you in the trenches, and I will celebrate you on the mountains. And we celebrate every little thing. It could be, like you said, just something very small, like clapping to someone else. But it's like Porter started mimicking the Noodle and Pals on YouTube.
Yes.
He started learning their super simple songs, and that I couldn't model it for him and him be able to repeat me.
Yeah.
But it somehow taught him how to repeat and mimic them. And one day I just looked over and I was like, honey, I think he is. And then Michael and I both looked at each other, like, he is doing the dance. He's doing the dance. He's falling when they fall on the ground. Because we were like, why does he keep falling at this one point on the thing? And he was probably 3 at the time. And it took us a minute to connect. And then it was like, he is doing what they're doing. And that was a huge day for us.
Yes.
So it's, I love that we both do that. And I think it's probably something that all autism parents do in their own way. They're always looking for the small wins.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you have to.
Mhm.
I think you have to. Otherwise, you would stay in a cycle of grief, which, we'll talk about more with the husbands too. But like that cycle of grief.
I think that's probably a deeper dive episode for us too to get into.
Yeah.
I could probably talk a whole hour on it.
Yes. Yeah, because it's a cycle for sure. So it kind of comes and goes.
Yeah. So we thought we were going to be able to do both of our journeys in one episode, but we are already almost 45 minutes. We both are doctors. That's why we started a podcast. So we can talk about it. But since we're, close to 40 minutes in, I think what we should do is just separate our journeys. And so we'll focus on yours today. And then episode 2 will be my journey.
Cool.
And then episode 3, we started to tease you, but we'll have to wait one more episode for the husband episode to come out. But to kind of close this up, we typically ask, we're going to have a segment on every episode where towards the end of the episode, we're going to ask our guests, tell us something that they think the world ought to know about autism. So I'm going to pose that question to you, but I want to do it in 2 folds, and probably as a little surprise to you, but I'd like to hear, when you are diagnosing and you've got the new mom in your room, what is something that you think she ought to know in that moment? And then I want to close out with asking you, what do you think the world should know, what they ought to know about your special Luca?
Yeah.
So let's start with, like, you diagnose sometimes all day long on those scheduled days.
Yes.
So what is something that you think a new mom or a new parent walking on this journey should know about the world of autism?
I always try to tell them, first, I don't give recommendations on the day of diagnosis because, like I told you, my mind went blank afterwards. And fortunately, I knew what to do next, but a typical parent may not. And so I don't give recommendations. I give the diagnosis, and then I bring them back a week or 2 later once they've had a minute to process and gather their thoughts again, and give recommendations. So that's one thing I do. But on that day when I deliver that diagnosis, as I'm going through why the diagnosis happened, I always make sure to point out multiple strengths of the kid that I saw. Because the one thing I always want moms to know is nothing is wrong with your kid. Your kid views the world differently, and we got to bob and weave with that kid. And every kid is different. They say you meet one person with autism, you meet one person with autism. But I always want a mama or a dad or a caregiver, grandparent, anybody who's caring for these kids to know that your kid is special and unique. Your kid is going to teach you more as a parent than any of your other kids. And it's also, they're going to teach you more about life than you'll ever think your child would teach you.
I don't know why that just happened.
Was it that good?
Maybe it's the fingers.
Oh.
On the husband's podcast, I was editing it, and the thumbs up will do a thumbs up. Look.
I think was my answer that good?
That's hilarious. So if you're watching us right now, you will see that the platform that we're using to record has like the new iPhone features to it too. So if like you're on FaceTime, have you noticed that? You can do a thumbs up and it'll do that too.
Okay.
So we're a fun bunch to watch. So we encourage you to not only listen, but put us on your TV screen and you'll see what just happened behind us.
And I am not a tech savvy person. So this was like, I thought it was giving me props for my good answer.
No, it was a great answer.
Well, thank you. And thank you, computer. But But yeah, so that's my biggest thing is I want the moms to focus on the kids' strengths.
I love that.
And so, but knowing that we have things we have to work on and working on those things, but focus on the kids' strengths. So that would be my answer for what I always want that mom to know, and that she's not alone. She's not alone. And there will be days where she really just like, somebody said it to me where it's like, I can't pick that piece of Pop-Tart up off the floor today because I just can't. And that is okay. On those days, you do whatever you can.
That's why we have dogs. They lick it up.
That's right. That's right. There's always.
Just find the grass is great. Just find your positive for that day. It's like,
right.
The dog will clean it up.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And if that piece of Pop-Tart sits there for that day, it's okay. It's okay. You get through the day, because there are days that like you're not going to be able to do that. And that's all right. And on days where you can, mama, you or dad, whoever the caregiver, you're going to conquer the world for that kid. You are that kid's biggest advocate. Don't forget it.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I think kind of in tandem with what you're saying, and we'll find this out on my journey, but my behavioral specialist was on the brink of retiring, very old school in her methods, very old school in her thought processes. And she didn't give us any kind of encouragement. It was just in and out. So what I did was, and I'll dive deep into it, but I just hashtagged autism. And one of the first videos that came up was someone that had just been, they had been diagnosed a year into diagnosis, and they wanted someone to know that your kid is the same on that day going into that visit room that they were going out of the visit room. That diagnosis didn't change your kiddo for that day. No. That diagnosis didn't change your kiddo for their life. All it did was opened up a world of resources by having that diagnosis, and that like helped shift my perspective on it. And it was really insightful from just like I don't think Reels were around, but at that time, probably TikTok, Yeah. It was in the middle of the pandemic. I was TikToking a lot.
Of course. But weren't we all? Well, except me, because I'm not tech savvy. But I love that. I have two feelings on that I want to touch on really fast. I love that you took the initiative to do that, but I hate that healthcare, she did the job, right? She didn't do it, but that I hate that, like, I want to change the culture in healthcare so badly.
I think it needs to be. She ultimately failed. I mean, she gave us the diagnosis, but she ultimately failed me as the mom and my son as the patient, because he deserved more. He deserved what you do for your patients and highlighting his strengths. We only talked about the negatives that day.
Yeah.
We only talked about do this, this, and this, and this immediately. And
don't think about preschool. Don't think about, we were told the same thing, and that was hard.
I was overwhelmed, absolutely overwhelmed. And I think that's what most moms are. So kudos to you for highlighting the strengths. I think it is something that moms and just parents in general definitely ought to know about this, is that your child is bright in their own way.
Absolutely.
Daggum geniuses in most cases. Like, they find their niche, and you can't tell them nothing. Like, they know it.
They know it, and they know it from such a young age.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just innate in them. It's amazing to me. Like Luca's gross motor is amazing, but wow, like, it's always been. I mean, he walks across a balance beam up the high one.
Yeah.
At gymnastics. I mean, I think he's visually stimming on the light. I kind of, I joke about it. I'm like, he's visually stimming, but like, whatever. He looks up, he doesn't look at the beam, but he knows where he is in space. He's so vestibular and knows where he is in space so well. It amazes me, since he was like 22 months old. So
we have the next Michael Phelps on our hands, and we have the next, what's a male gymnast? I don't want to do someone.
I don't know, male gymnast. Like Simone Biles, the male version.
Yes, there we go.
There we go.
Olympics 30 something.
That's
probably.
A lot of math. Yeah. Hold on, I need another sip of coffee. But yeah, one thing, and then you asked me the second part. So I'm really a talker. I could talk all day about my boy. But one thing about Luca that I want the world to know about him is that Luca will be a light in this world, because his sweet little smile and those big eyes of his he is going to just light up somebody's world one day. And he does. Everybody who meets Luca, we have a brand new PCA, a patient care advocate, which is a resource through the state you can get. And I mean, like, she says every time, she's like, oh my gosh, he brightened my day today, And I also feel that, on that day of diagnosis, I just kind of touched on, what you were saying is that we were focused on the negatives. And one thing we were told is don't even think about preschool for the next 2 years. I want to sit here and tell you my son is 3, and for the last over 1 year now, just about 13 months now, my son goes to a typical daycare setting, and he is loved and appreciated for who he is there. All the kids look after Luca, and they just kind of know, especially now that we're in the 3s class and not the 2s class anymore. They're like, it's okay, Luca, come over here.
That's cool.
And so they look out for him, and he has his ABA people there. He has his support. We're not just sending him, cold turkey. He goes to the preschool program through the Fort Mill School District, and we love his teachers. I also want to have her on. That's another special guest, very special to our hearts. And then he goes to therapy, but he goes to the trampoline park and plays like a typical kid. He goes to the park. I want people to know that don't limit your kid to just a bubble of autism. They're still a kid. And Luca shows me every day that, Mama, I can do this. Send me right into this preschool, and I'll put my little backpack on and march in just like any other 3-year-old. And he doesn't cry when I leave him. I mean, he gives me hugs and kisses, and he's like, I know I'm here for a little bit. It's his routine now. But he's a happy boy, and they love him. So I don't want parents to feel like that is something that can't be done because they receive an autism diagnosis. And I want them to know that through Luca.
Yeah, I think it's it's a very an archaic way of thinking, the way that we came into this journey with the behavioral specialist. Same kind of thing. Don't think about these things. But I think new age kind of way of thinking about autism is you may or may not have heard the saying, always presume competence.
Yep.
And that is something that it took me a minute because I wanted to just do everything for him. But once I took a step back and realized he knows what he's doing. He's okay. He's a big boy, and it's always presuming competence. And that's something that I've had to teach sometimes family. It's just think that he can do it, and he'll tell you if he can't.
Yeah.
He really will. He'll communicate. He'll ask for help in his own way, asking for a hand over hand, help.
And he's rocking the AAC device.
He is. He's rocking the AAC device. And I think that's something that it's cool that you're saying that about Luca. It's you pretty much just jumped right into that. Whereas it took me a minute to kind of presume competence. And I'm being very honest by saying that but I think it was because of the way I was brought into the journey with that behavioral specialist.
Sure.
I kind of adopted her mindset because she was the expert at the time, and not to negate her years of service to the community.
Sure.
But she was not an expert on my child.
You are the expert.
She was an expert on diagnosing.
Yeah.
And it took me a minute to become an expert on my child and realize that. And so it's pretty cool to always presume competence is something that I try to tell people. It's they'll let you know. Outside of safety,
right.
Outside of something that you might see he might injure himself in, presume he can do it. And if he can't, then show him step by step, because then the second time around, he will shock you.
He's going to do it.
It takes you one time to teach him how to do it, and he's got it.
They have memories like elephants. I say it all the time.
Me too. That's funny you say that. I said, he's got the brain of an elephant.
Yeah.
He can remember anything.
They amaze me. Oh, yeah. Driving somewhere, if we turn the wrong way, Luca's if he doesn't want to go there, he's or thinks we're going someplace and we turn the opposite, immediate tantrum.
Same.
And I'm like, dude, you know exactly where we're going.
Wait till you put an AAC into his hands, because now
we just ordered it.
We good. Oh, I'm excited for you, because now we drive by Javon's. I bought him a cake pop one time from Starbucks, and now every time we pass that specific Starbucks, or it could just be he sees the sign, the label of Starbucks, he brings out his AAC device and I want cake pop. all of a sudden I was just driving down the road, not thinking anything. I think I was probably just jamming or listening to a podcast. And I just hear, I want cake pop. And I was like, holy crap.
And you're like, well, we're going to Starbucks now.
I told Michael, I was like, one thing about me, I'm going to be late, but it's probably because I'm getting him a cake pop.
Yep, I'm going to listen to it. That's his voice.
Yeah.
And like, you want to show that voice has meaning.
Yes.
And I love it. Oh my gosh. Yeah. When Porter was over here and like, he just was wanting those yogurts.
Yes.
I was like, dude, if you're asking, I'm looking like, is it okay?
Well, now sometimes he didn't ask. He just walked right into your fridge and got it.
He knew where they were, you know? I mean, yeah, that's appropriate.
Oh, he can identify a refrigerator in any house. He is definitely food motivated.
Mine too. Woo. Yeah, I love it. Oh my gosh, our boys. Well, we thank you guys so much for listening to us. We hope that some of our journey, there was almost some tears. We fought them back, but we both were teary-eyed.
One shed on this side.
Did it?
Yeah.
You hit it well. I didn't see it. I saw you were teary-eyed. I was too. But yeah, we love, sharing our journey. We're so proud of our sons. I can't wait to hear more about Kelby's journey next time. And we hope that some things that we said today were relatable to you guys. And if, like we said earlier, if you have anything that you want us to share more on, let us know. We would love to. But otherwise,
yeah,
I think we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, something we want to kind of wrap it up and just remind everybody towards the end of each episode is that this is a judgment-free platform.
Yes.
We want to make that very clear to our audience. You are going to hear some things you may not agree with. This world of autism can be very controversial at times, and it can be very judgmental at times. We don't hold space for that here at all. We hold space for inclusivity, acceptance, and awareness. And if someone's going to come on and talk to us about something they think people ought to know outside of harm or a safety issue, it's welcomed here. It's a judgment-free platform. We want to hear anything and everything that people want to tell us and tell you as the listener so that we can learn and grow together. So you'll hear us talk on that. And I think we're going to cultivate a really good community with this, very inclusive, but sometimes you just have to let people know ahead of the time that it's not welcomed here. So you can leave that at the door.
Yeah. If you don't like things that we're talking about, that's okay. Like I said, everybody's welcome to their opinion. But if it's something that you really strongly disagree with, then you don't have to listen to that episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, our goal is to provide education. We're trying to educate ourselves as we go, and kind of build a community of moms, dads, caregivers, because, this world of autism as parents sometimes can feel isolating. And we never want a parent to feel that way. So we're here. And like Kelby said, we'll be your virtual friends until hopefully one day soon we can hold an in-person and we'll be your in-person friends.
We encourage you to subscribe on all of wherever you get your podcasts. You can watch us on YouTube. We're kind of a hoot in person. And we are creating a Facebook group. We have a Facebook page right now, but we want to create a Things You Ought to Know Facebook group so that you can go in and join that. I will be linking that in the podcast notes as soon as we have it available, and we'll announce it on the podcast when it is available. But that way we can kind of talk about the episode, deep dive it a little bit more, ask us some personal questions that you would like to know, and we can either answer it in the group or answer it on the next podcast if we think it's something that more people would like to know about.
Yeah. And the only other thing with the announcements are, we do have an educational tool that is going to come out in the next probably month that, you'll be able to get. And we're hoping to do some merch. So we have some really cool ideas that should be coming out. So stay tuned for those.
Yeah.
And if you have any ideas on any phrases that mean something to you or your family that you may want to see on a t-shirt or something like that of course is related to autism, send them our way, because we would love to, include include everybody
Yeah.
and, you know, make something personal for another family as well. But we definitely have some ideas from our families and experiences.
Definitely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks, Erica, for sharing your story today. I
Thanks
really
for listening.
appreciated the good, I mean, just a lot of it was very relatable, and some I didn't even, I didn't know. So it was awesome.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we'll see you on the next episode. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.